fentanyl, we know, is leading this terrible public health crisis, and 85% of those who died last year had fentanyl detected in their toxicology results.
Many people know we're in the midst of a public health emergency. This document lays out a pathway that can be taken to enhance the system of care and reduce overdose deaths in our province. The addiction care system needs to be funded in a more robust way. There's no question about that. All of these factors need to be considered when we're putting money into the system.
And it needs to be funded.
How are they the victims when it is ShaMay who is dead and surrounded with nothing but suspicion, corruption, unanswered fucking questions, a whole bunch of mystery, but we're not supposed to talk about it.
On the morning that ShaMay allegedly overdosed,
Don't know if you can hear this. Oh, wait, maybe not. I'm going to stop that. I think I know what I'm doing wrong. So we're going to stop that. I'm going to do it again. You see the white of the eye in the corner over here, and you can see how very large this pupil is. You can see the pupil here, and you can see the white of the eye. And also what I want you to notice, how can I do this? I'm hoping that this is recording. If you look right in here, people. Okay, notice how this goes down like that. Right up in here. There's something in here and it's not teeth. It's not teeth, people. Okay, now I don't know if you can hear the video. You should be able to hear the video, but I know you can hear me. So what you're looking at here is the inside of ShaMay's mouth been sewed up. Okay. I don't know if you can see my mouse. But you can definitely see those little lines. That's because that's sutures. That's somebody sewed something in there, people. Nowhere in there do you see my daughter's teeth. Now, hold on. Okay. I was doing a video talking about how the UN is taking over countries. But it started before this came in. Because there's a preceding one before this, which I'm going to pull up in a few minutes. But what happened was I was doing my live and my modem, my actual modem, I have a cable modem. Somebody kicked out my modem and shut down my internet completely. So, of course, I let 5-10 minutes go by. Wasn't kicking in. So I called up Shaw and I said, hey, what the hell's going on? Sure enough, just as I was on the phone, my internet came back. So anyway, I'm working on it. Now, I named this Illegal Organ Harvesting BC because that's, well, I did that little thing in there. I didn't name the video that. I named the video something else. Oh yeah. Illegal organ harvesting isn't a crisis yet. Yet, people. Because it's being buried through other issues. So what I'm going to do, I just wanted to bring this to the surface. I'm going to have to start working on this stuff again. It's very heartbreaking to do so, but I was actually looking for the video where it shows the actual orifice plug in the back of ShaMay's mouth, down in the throat area. But I'll have to hunt for that later, or do another video, or do something. But in the meantime, I'm going to exit out of this, quite possibly come back to it, and try and get back onto the subject, at least for a little bit, that I was on before I got kicked out with my modem being shut off from an outside source. Because I don't think it was just something random. See, I don't use Wi-Fi. I use an actual cable modem. So it came from somewhere else. Whether it came from StreamYard itself and they kicked me out, or whether it came from my service provider in terms of Shaw Cable and they kicked me out. But I just wanted to get back up and just, let people know that I didn't just randomly exit out of my live, right? Because I chose to do so. No, that's not what happened. But I am getting more and more convinced that I need to write some of this stuff down on a big piece of paper. It's different doing videos on a live stream, trying to pull up these different pages or videos or whatever, than it is with the camcord, right? But I'm going to stop this screen for a minute, and then I'm going to bring up another one just to kind of get back on track with what I was talking about a little bit at least. Now it's getting late and I'm kind of tired, so I'm not going to do this for very long. But I want to bring up this one to show you, excuse me, there we go. This one here is in line with that Sandia Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015-2013. If you notice the date on this one from 2005 to 2015, this was one of the first ones that they came out with, building the resilience of nations and communities to disasters. And then they revised it again in 2015, assuming to 2030, to build on this agenda to lull the global population into thinking that our multiple leaders are actually trying to protect us and protect our health, save lives. Challenge posed by disasters, the Yokohama strategy, lessons learned and gaps identified, objectives. Let's go down to objectives. Now, I haven't read these things into great detail, and when I did read them, I just kind of went through them briefly, right? But I'm going to have to kind of go through them a little better than what I have already, and I'm going to have to take it to a chart because it's too hard to find what I'm looking for and keep this live moving. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, World Conference on Disaster Reduction, Objectives, Expected Outcome, and Strategic Goals. Okay, it doesn't talk about illegal organ harvesting. You know, it doesn't talk about, communities being flooded with drugs so that people die en masse, so that we can have a crisis around that, which produces a surplus of organs that become a commodity and something to exploit. It's trafficking of human body parts, right? Dead or alive. Okay? Right? Nowhere in here is it written for this kind of disaster, even though we have it. But anyway, the World Conference on Disaster Reduction was convened by decision of the General Assembly with 5 specific objectives: to conclude and report on the review of the Yokohama strategy and its plan of action, with a view of updating the guiding framework on disasters reduction for the 21st century. Key word: disaster reduction. To identify specific activities aimed at ensuring the implementation of relevant provisions of the Johannesburg Plan of Implementation of the World Summit on Sustainable Development on Vulnerability, Risk Assessment, and Disaster Management. To share good practices and lessons learned to further disaster reduction within the context of attaining sustainable development, to identify gaps and challenges. To increase awareness of the importance of disaster reduction policies, people. Okay. COVID-19 was the means to bring in these words. Okay. How are they going to reduce forest fires, right? With reductions to forest fires on a global scale when that's not really the agenda. The agenda is to vaccinate. I mean, that, and to control and to track and to target. That's coming to a head. More and more people are realizing this. Okay, you don't see me because I don't have me on here. I just have this. So let's just read. To increase awareness. To increase awareness of the importance of disaster reduction policies, thereby facilitating and promoting the implementation of those policies. They're trying to divert a disaster with COVID-19 by bringing in martial law, basically social distancing, which can bring in other programs like tracking, right? Targeting of energy weapons, whatever they want to do, really. And it's all done through fear-mongering, presto science, ambiguity, threats, orders, right? To increase the reliability and availability of appropriate disaster-related information to the public and disaster management agencies in all regions as set out in relevant provisions of the Johannesburg Plan of Implementation. Now, maybe I looked at the Johannesburg Plan of Implementation, but that's for another day. Expected outcome. Taking these objectives into account and drawing on the conclusion of the review of the Yokohama Strategy, states and other actors participating at the World Conference on Disaster Reduction. Remember, it came in through the back door through your state or provincial emergency preparedness legislation. Okay? Because this is an outside source. This has nothing to do with a nation's sovereignty, right? Hereinafter referred to as the conference, resolved to pursue the following expected outcome for the next 10 years. That's why they came out with the new one in 2015. And then British Columbia, Canada sort of adopted it in 2018 at about the same time that this Dr. Bonnie Henry became whoever she is within the Legislative House of Assemblies, when it becomes like the top doc of the province, even though she's not a real doctor. She has the title of a doctor, but she has no patients. I want to say she has victims because she's setting up 5.1 million and a bit up for forced vaccinations as she breathes out on the other side of her mouth. No, that's not going to happen. When in fact, you already heard me say on my previous video that the Premier has already prepared the general public to be vaccinated, because nothing will change until we have a vaccine. So he's already laid down the precedents. He's already laid down the law, the rules, whatever you want to call it. Right? Because we're dealing with an outside agenda. The politicians are not working for the people. They're working for the corporations, the Bill Gates Foundation, and all those companies that are going to be making vaccines and, that type of stuff. So let me see if I can continue reading this. Right? Because, you know, this is more of a crisis, right? In regards to for the health and the benefit of the general population. Okay. Expected outcomes. The substantial reduction of disaster losses in lives and in social, economic, and environmental assets of communities and countries. Well, we already know that the United States of America is on the crises of bankruptcy, where it's worse than the Great Depression, right? And the same is true for Canada. The only people who are flourishing at this point are the essential workers, right? Because their jobs are guaranteed. Got to keep those unions happy and those pension plans fat, right? And plentiful for the union sector, public union sector, that is, right? And the rich, obviously, because it's a building boom, right? Somebody's buying. It's not the Canadians who are buying, but somebody's buying. And not only that, but it's a great venue to launder money. So they had to keep the buildings going up, right? But at the end of the day, 1 million people were forced into poverty just like that. So that in itself contradicts what this says. The substantial reduction of disaster losses. So 1 million people went into poverty, right, for the sole purpose to bring a UN agenda in through the back door off the backs of people being exploited with misinformation in terms of, well, we saved lives. How many lives did they save, people? When they ruined over 1 million. Losses in lives. Never saved ShaMay's life. We've been in a fentanyl crisis for how long? They haven't done jack shit about it. Okay? It's a major disaster when it comes to illegal organ harvesting in the province of British Columbia, Canada. And they don't even address it. And in the social, well, there is nothing social anymore. Everything's social distance, with everybody got their fingers up saying, stay away, right? Economic, 1 million more people pushed into poverty, right? And environmental assets of communities and countries. The realization of this outcome will require the full commitment and involvement of all actors. Exactly. When Uncle John went into the freaking hospital, all those healthcare staff became theatrical and were nothing more than actors. Same thing with ShaMay being hooked up to those machines with those Lucy's hovering around her dead body, carrying on with their charade, right? Actors. They got that word spot on. Concerned, including governments, regional and international organizations, civil society, including volunteers, private sector, and scientific community. Strategic goals. To obtain this expected outcome. Remember I told you mitigate? The conference resolves to adopt the following strategic goals. The more effective integration of disaster risk consideration into sustainable development policies, planning and programming at all levels, with a special emphasis on disaster prevention, mitigation, preparedness, and vulnerability reduction. The development and strengthening of institutions, mechanisms, and capacities at all levels, in particular at the community level, that can systematically contribute to building resilience to hazards. Social distancing, stay in your house, close down businesses, okay? Right? The systematic incorporation of risk reduction. Everything that they've been doing around this COVID-19 coronavirus has been the incorporation of risk reduction approaches into the design and implementation of emergency preparedness, response, and recovery programs in the reconstruction of affected communities. The only thing is, it's everybody, because it came in one sweep, because it's a political agenda, right? It's almost like Bill Gates bought the world and is laying claim on polluting it with his vaccines now, because he paid for that right. Because everybody's facing the same dilemma. Priorities for action 2005-2015, general consideration. In determining appropriate action. Here. Just hold on. What's going on? 4 people watching. Hey, sweet, how you been? Well, I was doing a little live earlier, but I got kicked out by somebody. My modem. I have a cable modem. I don't use Wi-Fi. I have a cable that goes into a modem that's bridged. So, but I don't know. They kicked me out, and I just didn't feel good about just leaving it like this, right? I just wanted to come in and kind of follow up on what I was talking about prior to being kicked off the internet. So I'll let you guys just talk in there and let me just continue reading, okay? Where am I? All right, you guys just carry on. Okay, general consideration. The principles contained, in determining appropriate action to achieve the expected outcome and strategic goals, the conference reaffirms that the following general consideration will be taken into account. The principles contained in the Yokohama strategy retain their full relevance in the current context, which is characterized by increasing commitment to disaster reduction. Key word, disaster reduction. They are not doing what they're doing because they're trying to save lives. They're doing what they're doing because they're trying to reduce the disaster. That is the premise, but that's just the smokescreen, people. Okay, they're just using that as the smokescreen. We're trying to reduce the disaster. We don't want 5 million people to die. No. Right? So we're going to bring in social distancing, this, that, shut down all these businesses, and come out, chase after you with contact tracing. And, we're going to follow up, and we're going to quarantine, and we're going to stop this and stop that. And it's all to reduce the disaster. But there's an agenda behind it. Right? And we know that. Because the premier yesterday, already admitted nothing's going to get better until we get a vaccine. Just like they push their OxyContin, their oxycodone, their morphine, their fentanyl, their immunization, whatevers, they're going to force this onto the public because other people have taken over the country. basically, because this wasn't written in Canada. It wasn't written for the Canadian people. Taking into account the importance of international cooperation. Wow, isn't that interesting? Only 187, 84, 89, I don't know how many hundreds, almost 200 countries all signed on at the same time. And then blame China for it. And partnerships, each state has the primary responsibility for its own sustainable development and for taking effective measures to reduce disaster risks, including for the protection of the people on its territory, infrastructure, and other national assets from the impact of disasters. Okay, they're supposed to protect the people, but putting 1 million people into poverty, right? Where some of them are going to end up homeless, where some of them are going to lose their kids, where some of them are going to go crazy and kill themselves, where some of them are going to go completely bankrupt and end up living in a hobbit hole, and so on and so on and so on. They are not protecting those people. They are exploiting those people for a political agenda that took root around the UN table. At the same time, in the context of increasing global interdependence, concerted international cooperation, and if you listen to these politicians, what do? What are they doing? They're following this to the T. If you listen, oh, well, we're just waiting to see what Spain has to say. Oh, we're just waiting to see what New York has to say. Oh, this, our colleagues, that are, like us, like Dr. Bonnie Henry, I'm on the phone with them in the States, keeping up with the new news around, this emergency. We're in communication and we're working together because we're following this framework, right? Okay. At the same time, in the context of increasing global interdependence, concerted international cooperation, and enabling international environment are required to stimulate and contribute to developing the knowledge, capacities, and motivation needed for disaster risk reduction at all levels. Doesn't that sound familiar? C, an integrated multi-hazard approach to disaster risk reduction should be factored into policies, plannings, and programming related to sustainable development, Agenda 20, and now it's Agenda 2030, and then they've got Agenda 2050, right? Relief, rehabilitation, and recovery activities in post-disaster and post-conflict situations in disaster-prone countries. A gender perspective should be integrated into all disaster risk management policies, plans, and decision-making processes, including those related to risk assessment, early warning, information management, and education and training. Cultural diversity, age, and vulnerable groups should be taken into account when planning for disaster risk reduction as appropriate. Well, when you're topping over 1,500 deaths a year, just in fentanyl-related deaths, that in itself is a disaster, but you don't see anybody jumping on board for that one. No. Because what it does is it produces one man's junk, which becomes another man's commodity that can create a profit for the underground economy. when it isn't being used in an honor walk to keep the public fooled. I don't know. Okay, what's going on in here? Male or female? Ooh, dating. And are we dating? Have you heard of transgender MTV can now have uterus implants? Male to female. Well, you know what? The person who harvested my daughter organs, ShaMay's, was a gynecologist. And what do gynecologists like? They like the uterus. They like the womb. They like the eggs, right? You know, I'm wondering if they took ShaMay's eggs because she was extremely fertile and are using them for science experiments in terms of cloning, right? Like, seriously, I really question it. Or if maybe they took out her uterus and her womb to do something like that. Because we're not dealing with ethical people here, right? And that's why I'm doing these videos. Because you're one or the other. You either have ethics or you don't. And if you have it, it never leaves you, no matter what happens. They open a lot here, I think. It's too soon, sweet pea. Okay, well, you know, I don't know. I think we're being lied to, personally. I can see the political agenda that's wrapped around what's going on. You know, it's one of those things, believe half of what you see and none of what you hear, right? I know for some people, it's been great. I'll give you just a small example. Over here in the subsidized housing, where a large majority of those people are on social assistance, and this all came about, they got an extra $300 a month on their welfare check. Hey, they're happy. Of course, they're going to want to stay home. They're already home anyway. The thing is, this is how warped thinking is. The little boys that live over there, right? They're playing in the courtyard, running around, you know, coming into contact, whatever, right? Andre and his little friend asked if those little boys could come over here to my yard and play outside. So I went with the little boys to go ask the grandfather, one little boy, and the mother of the other little boy, if those two little boys could cross over the street and play in the yard with Andre and his little friend. And they both said no. No, they couldn't. And I said, well, why? Why not? Oh, well, because of the coronavirus. Okay, so you'll just let those little boys run around in the courtyard, come into contact with whoever is out there. It doesn't matter, right? Andre could have been out there. You know, lots of kids could out there. But it's not okay for those little boys to come over to my yard and play with Andre and his little friend because of the coronavirus. But at the same time, those people, right, they're not in no hurry to have the coronavirus end anytime soon, because in their minds, they're thinking about the extra money that they're going to get on their welfare check, even though they don't work, right? Just, right? Free money is free money. I'm just saying. There's a lot of people out there like that don't want it to change, because what the government has done by what I'm reading to you here right now, okay, is they covered their asses because it says in this framework that came in what, 2005? It was written in 2005 for 2015, and then they revised it in 2015. Okay. What's on the screen there is the first one, right? From 2005 to 2015. And then they came in with this one in 2015 to 2030. But what I'm reading to you, as you go down into it, it specifically says that they're supposed to mitigate, reduce the reduction, and reduce the disaster, right? To save lives, save the economy, save communities. You heard me reading that. And that's why the government came out very quick with this money out of the fucking rabbit's hat, right? To mitigate the disaster that they created, people, by ramming this home. Now, I know you don't see that because you're living in fear of living. You don't want to get sick and die. I understand that. Most people don't. Right? But at the end of the day, the numbers aren't adding up when it comes to people dying from the coronavirus. Okay, there's been a lot of fraud involved, and people know it, but they live with it. Okay, I'm seriously considering homeschooling this coming year, sweet pea, because they're talking like schools are going back as normal. Yeah, okay, Tanya, and this is another thing. Psychological warfare on our children, like, this is seriously wrong. And it's not just social distancing them. I mean, they are permanently altering the brain of developing children by creating high levels of cortisol that results from stress. I've already done a little video on this. Some children, through institutional racism within our public school systems and private, but we'll just focus on public. Through institutional racism within our public school systems, some children are going to be targeted as they're forced to be isolated onto that X because of a pandemic that was created long before it ever showed up on our doorstep, with it being implemented with the writings of this framework from 2005 to 2015, and then they fucking did it again in 2015, and they didn't want to wait till a real pandemic came. What is it with my lights keep flickering on and off in here? Something else just did something. What do you thought? It's this. Okay. Exactly. They're doing experiments on these children. That's what my feelings are around it. Now, I know I'm not biased because my family has been through a lot, and we've suffered a lot of, I guess you could say, brain damage as a direct result from the public union sector and their attack on my family. Right? Kicking Ciera out in the middle of the winter, telling her not to come home. If she does, they're going to take Andre. because they wanted to teach her a lesson. Right there is the beginning of cortisol going ping. And then they kept it at that level when they wrongfully took Andre and then put him in foster care 15 months, as I went to court 22 times and never once, well, in 22 times, I got to speak to the judge once. And that one judge knew I had custody of my grandson, ignored everything that I was saying, and then told me to go get a fucking lawyer, even though I tried to get a lawyer and I was denied a lawyer. And because he didn't want to do his job, he sent me away. And then it got approved at head office in Victoria to give me a lawyer, because by that time I had already gone to the Supreme Court and was going to file a fucking lawsuit to get my grandson back. Anyway, long story short, that was like 15 months of living hell. Go into my videos. You can see it. Videos of ShaMay, depressed of what's going on, right? If they require vaccines to go back to school, I will homeschool. So you're okay with social distancing? What if they're using energy weapons on their targeted children? Right? They want to test them every day for a fever. Every day they go in, they're going to be testing their temperature. Why? Why? So they can come knocking on your door and then take your child and say you can't see your child now because they're under quarantine, and do whatever they want with your child. You don't think that your brain and your loved ones in your family unit aren't going to go fucking crazy and have that cortisol go raging out of control, not to mention the child that's at the mercy of these people who are considered essential service workers, providing protection for the benefit of so-called communities. I've given you the framework that they are doing this under, but it's contrary to what they're saying in terms of what they write down is opposite of what's happening. But they mask it over by giving people a little bit of money to make it look like they're not causing harm or injury, when in fact they've destroyed millions of lives. Okay? And they're causing permanent brain damage in millions of children and young people. And they're altering brain development in general by going against nature. Okay? Imagine yourself going to school, being reprimanded because you crossed over the line and got too close to your friend. Because sooner or later, that's going to happen to some kids. Right? And then, if they get dubbed to be the bad kid, little girl, or the bad little boy, then they have to go home. You know, you got the principal, oh, they didn't follow the rules. You know, they walked into just walked right, you know, something wrong with that child. They need to go on Ritalin. They don't know how to follow the fucking rules. Right? They couldn't wait their turn to go to the bathroom. You know, they rushed into the bathroom when there was another kid in the bathroom. So we had to send him home because he can't control himself. Right? It's going to go down that path, people, because it was already there. My own kids have been targeted within the public school system. Ciera was targeted. My son was targeted. Fucking ShaMay was targeted. Tisha was targeted. Right? Different methods of targeting children in school, but it happens. And if it happened then, it's going to continue to happen. How the fuck they gonna social distance in crowded schools? Well, they've already done it. They've got 8 kids in a class, 2 meters apart, or 12 feet apart, or something, right? At least 6 feet apart. They're not allowed to interchange. They're not allowed to eat together, unless, of course, they come from the same household, right? At this point, there is no expectation to send kids to school because the staff, the teachers, are still trying to figure out how to do this, right? They're going to do half days, shorter weeks in between, like a child, instead of going 5 days a week from, 9 in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they might only go 3 days a week, half days, while everybody's 6 feet apart. And you're going to tell me that's not going to cause permanent psychological damage in these developing minds? What are we creating here, people? Robots? Tanya, exactly, Sweet Pea. They won't be able to. My daughter already has anxiety. Sweet Pea, never will they inject the crap in my child. What you gonna do when they come knocking though and say you don't have a choice? This is where people need to kind of like maybe be one step ahead of the game here versus trying to play catch up to what they've already got planned for us. Yep, quick to say ADHD or autistic, but they are cutting the number of teachers. Well, in my province, that subject came up, but then the premier got up, or the Minister of Education, one or the other, got up there and said, oh yeah, okay, that's only temporary, right? Because they're under contract. Teachers are under contract, and by being under contract, this is where the union comes first, no matter what, right? The government is obligated to fulfill that contract. So even if they get a pink slip for a little while, it's only for a little while. They need to just go ahead, let them do online school for now. I don't know about that. Why do we want to encourage kids to get addicted to the internet, people? Think about it, right? We know that the internet is addictive. Why do we want to encourage our kids to, especially at an early age, to give up being a kid and learning through, hands-on experience, play, whatever it is, right? Or at their own pace, versus trying to sit them down in front of a computer, communicating with somebody on the other end. I think that's more dangerous than we think it is, because you're allowing somebody on the other end to manipulate your child, not to mention the subliminal messaging, imagery, whatever it is that's coming in through the internet that's making permanent imprints in children's minds. People pay taxes for public schools. But for whatever reason, I guess it's too burdensome for the government to keep them open. Right? As a matter of fact, I've heard politicians say, well, it's like daycare for parents. School is like daycare for parents. It's free daycare for parents. You know, if school was open, parents could go to work, right? But now that school isn't open like it used to be, parents are scrambling. Anyway, public education came in through some president in the United States of America way back in the day. I don't remember who it was. And he went into debt for it, people. Like, he gave it his all. He put in 200% to bring in public education because the elite were prospering while the poor were drowning. And that president sacrificed it all and went into fucking debt to bring in public education for kids in general to help reverse poverty. Now, 100 years later, or how many years later, we've got the public union sector trying to downsize the public school system, right? So that they still get paid, but the kids are going to be paying the bigger price to being confined to online learning, which again is very easy to manipulate in terms of how the internet can imprint itself into people's brains, first of all, right? And it's just setting up the next generation of isolated human beings that communicate only through a cell phone. You know, you're at a party and everybody's on their cell phone, right? It just further isolates people from each other. While the union continues to get fed in terms of the essential workers will still get paid. They'll still have all their benefits. They'll have everything that they already have, people, because that's the agenda. But they're cutting the cost at the expense of robbing the children of those services for those parents that want their kids in a public school. Well, I don't know about intelligent and tough, but you know, I have experiences with different things just with my own kids. And, you know, obviously I read a lot and stuff like that. Uncle John was a great mentor, honest to God. You know, people maybe didn't think he was intelligent as he looked, but he was pretty spot on a lot of things. But yeah, no, we need to, you know, like this social distancing in school and stuff like this is all for the benefit of the public union sector. This is not in the benefit of protecting kids. As a matter of fact, they even say that kids don't get COVID-19 as readily as old people. And if kids get it, they're not getting it from school. They're not getting it from daycare. They're not getting it out in the playground. They're getting it from their parents. Right? I don't know. Okay, let's get back onto this. Let me read on a little bit more, okay? Because this is important to understand why we are here where we're at with all this, okay? So I'm going to just get back up and read this. You guys can chat if you want. Okay, disaster-prone development. I'm on G. Disaster-prone development. Let me bring this up for a minute. Whatever. Hold on. Where am I? Let me just bring this up. Okay, I'm going to read this for a few minutes. You guys can chat. Okay. Both communities and local authorities should be empowered to manage and reduce disaster risk by having access to necessary information, resources, and authority to implement actions for disaster risk reduction. Disaster-prone developing countries, especially least developed countries and small island developing states, warrants particular attention in view of their higher vulnerability and risk levels, which often greatly exceed their capacity to respond to and recover from disaster. What about Haiti? Haiti, well, you can't see me because I got this up. But what about Haiti? Haiti's been in a state of disaster for how many years? For all this rhetoric, what has this done for the people of Haiti? Ask yourself that one. There is a need to enhance international and regional cooperation and assistance in the field of disaster risk reduction through I don't know how to pronounce that. Anyway, the transfer of knowledge, technology, and expertise to enhance capacity building for disaster risk reduction. The sharing of research findings, lessons learned, and best practices. And if you're following the COVID-19, it's this multi-network of politicians, right, that are using puppets to promote their political agenda in the form of so-called doctors that have no real patience, but somehow they're doctors, to push forward the envelope. The compilation of information on disaster risk and impact for all scales of disasters in a way that can inform sustainable development and disaster risk reduction. That's why they put a handle on trying to control hospitals, right? They're using hospitals as a means to control the disaster. So they took away elective surgeries, right? They, made other areas for large numbers of COVID patients, which never showed up in many instances. They took money away from one budget and then shifted it over to the healthcare system to fill in the gap of masks and gloves and all this other stuff, right? For sustainable development, okay? That's why I pointed that out. Appropriate support in order to enhance governance for disaster risk reduction, for awareness raising initiatives, and for capacity development measures at all levels in order to improve the disaster resilience of developing countries. You don't hear much, though, about what's going on out there, right? I mean, they made it sound like, we're going to go help Africa. But for all the years that Africa has been on the ocean, not too many people have gone out to Africa and followed through on this mandate. The full, speedy, and effective implementation of the enhanced, heavily indebted poor countries initiative, that's something else that should be looked up, taking into account the impact of disasters on the debt sustainability of countries eligible for this program, financial assistance to reduce existing risks and to avoid the generation of new risks. The promotion of a culture of prevention, including through the mobilization of adequate resources for disaster risk reduction, Anyway, you get the point. Disaster risk reduction. Disaster risk reduction in an investment for the future with sustainable returns. Risk, well, but where's the returns coming in from, people? If you've knocked 1 million people basically into poverty, and once you're there, it's extremely hard to crawl back out. What that does, though, is it guarantees an income for the essential workers, because they're the ones that need to be sustained. Obviously, they're essential, so their paychecks are sustained. But the million that lost their employment, right, because they shut down whole industries, there's no sustainability there. The only thing that's being sustained are organs, the ability to harvest more organs because of the dysfunction that comes around with the million more people being in poverty. Risk assessments and early warning systems are essential investments that protect and save lives. Whose lives are they protecting? They're sure in the hell not protecting those million lives that they forced into poverty, right? Property. If you've got 10,000 businesses going bankrupt, how the hell did they protect property? They didn't. And livelihoods. They destroyed livelihoods. This is why I'm reading this to you, because it's everything that's written here. They haven't followed through on it. Okay? They failed miserably, but people aren't aware of these accords or frameworks or whatever these things are called. Contribute to the sustainability of development and are far more cost-effective in strengthening coping mechanisms that is primary reliance on post-disaster response and recovery. That's why we've got stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. We're going into the recovery, but we already had the premier say yesterday that there won't be no full recovery until there's a vaccine, which just props up another public union sector in terms of the pharmaceutical industry and the healthcare system. That's all it does, is just redirecting more tax dollars into buying fucking vaccines. And then once they have them, they're going to want to use them because they're tracking us, people. Right? There is also need for proactive measures, bearing in mind that the phrases of relief. Hold on. I know you're just looking at that. Probably want to look at me. There we go. I'm just reading. How many's watching? I can't see. 3. Okay. There is a need for proactive measures, bearing in mind that the phrases of relief. What was the relief that our politicians gave us? Money. Rehabilitation. Well, I guess that's those guidelines that with the plexiglass and, the Star Wars masks and, the social distancing with the X that you have to stand in between 6 feet, 2 feet, whatever, 12 feet apart, right? Reconstruction following the disaster are windows of opportunity for the rebuilding of livelihoods. So now the government's going to take on the role of re-educating the million lives that they've ruined and put them into job descriptions through their various ministries, right? And there's going to come a time where people just won't have a choice. And for the planning and reconstruction of physical and social economic structures in a way that will build community resilience and reduce vulnerability to future disaster risks. That could mean anything, people.
That's too ambiguous. Nobody can predict a disaster until a disaster happens. And if they can, like a forest fire, well, there's lots of things that a government can do to prevent forest fires, right? But when you get governments that come on board and don't do the best practice when it comes to forest care in terms of, you know, whatever people do to control forest fires, like, you know, like you can do things, you burn off certain stuff at certain times of the year in order to cut down the risk for a forest fire, right? If they don't do that, maintain forests, then sooner or later you're going to get forest fires. Disaster risk reduction is a cross-cutting issue in the context of sustainable development and therefore an important element for the achievement of intentionally agreed development goals, including those contained in the Millennium Declaration. That's something else to draw on. In addition, every effort should be made to use humanitarian assistance in such a way that risks and future vulnerabilities will be lessened as much as possible. And all you have to do is think about Haiti. Haiti is the perfect example of how this program is already a failed program, because in Haiti, nothing has changed. They had that big earthquake or tsunami or whatever it was that wiped out so many people, and they're still wiped out people. Where's the Red Cross? What happened to the Red Cross? Has anyone heard of the Red Cross in the last 5 years, 6 years? Do they even exist anymore? Priorities for action. Drawing on the conclusion of the review of the Yokohama strategy and on the basis of deliberation of the World Conference on Disaster Reduction, and especially the agreed expected outcome and strategic goals, the conference has adopted the following 5 priorities for action. Doesn't that sound familiar? Gordon Campbell's 5 great goals. Ensure that disaster risk reduction is a national and local priority with a strong institutional basis for implementation. Identify, assesses, and monitor disaster risks and enhance early warning. Use knowledge, innovation, and education to build on culture culture of safety and resilience at all levels. Reduce the underlying risk factors. That's where that social distancing comes in. That's reducing the underlying risk factors, but you seem to forget that there's more involved. We're just not being told about it. Strengthen disaster preparedness for effective response at all levels. In their approach to disaster risk reduction, states, regional, and international organizations and other actors concerned should take into consideration the key activities listed under each of these 5 priorities and should implement them as appropriate to their own circumstances and capabilities. Okay, I'm not going to read all that. All right. We get the gist of what I'm trying to say here, at least for now. I will try to bring it to a, I'm going to go, it's like 3:25 in the morning here too. And I've been tired. I just wanted to come back and, just follow up on kind of what I was talking about before I got kicked out off the internet, literally, right? I want to see if I can get this to work. So what I'm going to do, hold on a minute, because I'm still trying to figure this out. I can't stop the flashing because that's, I don't know what that is. That's something to do with StreamYard and maybe my computer, right? But I was going to do a little more here in regards to oh, hold on. No, just I know what I think. I think I know what I do wrong. Hold on. Before I play that, do that again.
On fentanyl. She was with her
I
boyfriend.
need to know if you can
Julian.
hear this.
On the morning of the events, she would be seen in her Snapchats, basically saying that her son was sick and she was getting ready to lay him down, in which she would lay down herself. It is alleged that Julian is responsible for the overdose of ShaMay. On top of having access to the drug, he also had a history of bad behavior.
I ate the same shit you did. How am I gonna drug your food? How? Because you gotta fucking.
On the morning of ShaMay's overdose, she is seen in her last Snapchat before death in a black tank top, which now has vanished. It is alleged that this is done in a cover-up by Julian, but he would never get his chance to tell his side of the story. The only eyewitness would fall victim to a homicide. Julian Johnson will be the victim of a homicide. Police say that it is due to a gang war that has been brewing underneath. In light of the situation, some may believe that it's karma. But if the allegations that he is responsible for ShaMay's death is the truth, he took it to the grave. On the morning of the overdose, ShaMay was rushed to the hospital where she was immediately hooked on life support. Due to it being a fentanyl overdose, the medical system looked at this as just another overdose. During the time that ShaMay was hooked up on life support, her body would show signs of decomposition. It is believed that ShaMay was hooked up on life support in order to preserve the body for organ harvesting. There is a lot of evidence pointing toward this. Amongst evidence collected, there's also this one damning piece of evidence, and that's that ShaMay was actually discharged from the hospital 2 days prior to her being taken off of life support. Being formally discharged 2 days prior to being removed from life support points directly at a cover-up. Due to the high number of overdoses in British Columbia, they have been turning around and making a profit off organ harvesting. British Columbia, Canada is no different than the United States of America. They live in a system designed to keep the rich rich and the poor poor. ShaMay was no stranger to the system. Her family was gang-stalked for a large portion of her life. ShaMay was raised to believe in love and unity. Her family would be a pillar to the community. It's no secret that when you preach love and unity, you become a target.
Do that again. 1, 2. Okay, try to do it with them. Let's do the 1, 2. Everybody get the 1, 2 going. 1, 2. Nobody has to leave so he can follow.
These are the simple things in life that people have seemed to.
Okay, you should be able to hear that. I don't know.
To justice for ShaMay.
Bye-bye.
Andre. Say hi, Andre. Bye, Andre.
Say hi, Andre. Say I love you.
I love you.
And since what's happened to my daughter, I live in fear now.